Good morning. My name's Rod Peppiatt and I come to you on this beautiful Sunday morning in Melbourne from the Avenue Uniting Church in Blackburn. We meet on the lands of the Wurundjeri peoples of the Kulin Nation. Today I begin by reading from a letter to the church at Corinth by the Apostle Paul, 1 Corinthians chapter 9. If I proclaim the gospel, this gives me no ground for boasting, for an obligation is laid on me, and woe betide if I do not proclaim the gospel. For if I do this of my own will, I have a reward, but if not of my own will, I am entrusted with a commission. What then is my reward? Just this, that in my proclamation I may make the gospel free of charge, so as not to make full use of my rights in the gospel. For though I am free with respect to all, I have made myself a slave to all, so that I might win some of them. To the Jews I became as a Jew in order to win Jews. To those under the law I became as one under the law, although I myself am not under the law, so that I might win those who are. To those outside the law I became one as one outside the law. Paul has long sentences. To the weak I became weak, so that I might win the weak. I have become all things to all people, so that I might by any means save some. I do it all for the sake of the gospel, so that I might share in its blessings. I want to tell you a story, if I may. It's a story about a camel. A camel called Boris, at least in this version of the story. Now, Boris was bored with being a camel. And what's more, he looked and saw his reflection in the pond, and he didn't like his looks either, especially that hump thing. He wished he was like all the other animals that he saw. They looked much more interesting than him, and they didn't have a hump. Anyway, Boris was wandering around one day and he was grumping about being a camel when he met a big grey creature. "What are you?" asked Boris. "I'm an elephant," said the big grey creature, as he picked up water from the lake and squirted all over himself like a great big shower. "Wow, I wish I had one of those." Whoosh! He did. He had a trunk. "Hey, what just happened? I've got one of those great big long things on my face." He calls it a trunk. "Oh, hey, this is cool. Hang on. I'm a camel, but now I have a trunk like an elephant. I must be a camelephant." Boris went on a bit, and he saw an animal running and leaping around the place. "Whoa, I wish I had legs that I could do that." Whoosh! He did. Skinny, strong, bouncy legs. "This is cool. I like these wishes. Hang on, I'm a camelephant with legs like what are you called?" "Well, I'm an antelope." "Oh. Well, that must make me a camelophantelope." Near the lake, he met a bird. He knew that one. She was a pelican. But she looked at him and said, "What are you?" "I'm a camelophantelope," he said. "Ha, never heard of it," she laughed. As she watched, she picked up some fish in her beak to take home to her children. "Oh, I wish I could do that," said Boris. Whoosh! He could, because now he had a beak, a big one. "Holy dooly," he thought. "Now I can take home fish to my kids." "Oh, I don't have any kids." And if I did, they wouldn't like fish anyway. Boris was beginning to wonder about his wishes and whether they had been a good idea. Because now he seemed to be a camelophantalopelican. But as he was thinking about this, suddenly he saw this beautiful little yellow bird singing the most wonderful songs, and I'm sure we know what the bird is. Wow! I wish I could sing like that. Well, what do you reckon? Whoosh! Next time he opened his mouth, out came the most beautiful song. And off he went, singing as he walked or leaped on his skinny antelope legs. But everyone he met along the way gave him really strange looks, and many of them just fell about laughing. Finally, a snake stopped laughing long enough to ask him, "What on earth are you?" And Boris replied, "Well, I'm a camelophantalopelicanary." "A what?" they all asked. A camelophantalopelicanary, he said, a little less proudly. All the animals laughed so hard they couldn't stand up. They couldn't stop. So Boris, the camelophantalopelicanary, looked at his reflection in the lake water, and he realised that he actually looked pretty silly. And he didn't feel much like singing or leaping anymore or carrying fish. All these bits look better on the other animals than birds, he thought, sadly. I think I was better off as a camel. I wish I was a camel again. And whoosh! Boris looked back in the water and he was a camel again. "That's much better," all the other animals said. "You're a camel. Be a camel." Boris learned something really important that day. Instead of trying to be something he wasn't, like a camelophantalopelicanary, only just got it out that time, he was better off being the best camel he could be. Now maybe you've worked out where I'm going with this in relation to Paul's words with the Corinthians about being all things to all people. But let me just show you this camelophantalopelicanary. For me, this is a good example of the way that taking the Bible seriously means you don't literally agree with everything it says. And as I read these words of Paul about being all things to all people, I found myself in a bit of a yes, but type situation. Yes, I understood and absolutely agree with him about meeting people where they are, about entering into their life and experience. For him, that meant taking their stories, their understanding of themselves, their life and their spiritual experiences. That's how you make connection, and he was really good at it. He also had an advantage in this. We understand that Paul was both a Jew and a Roman citizen. Not quite sure how that happens, but he was. That's what we understand. And for him to say what he did was an acknowledgement that he was able to speak with both Jew and Gentile. He understood what it was to be a Jew and all of the practices and the law that they hold precious, because he was one. And he understood also what it was like to be outside that. He spent a lot of his time in his missionary journeys outside temples and talking to those outside the synagogues. He understood. He was able to enter the culture and conversation of both. That's the yes. Here's the but. We can hear those stories of Paul and words of Paul, and believe, wrongly I think, that discipleship means trying to be something that we're not. Many years ago I had a crisis of faith. I've had a few, but I think of one in particular. It was inconvenient because I was training for ordained ministry at the time. But the crisis came because somehow I'd developed the idea that a real minister needed to be able to talk with anyone at any time about anything with authority, and especially about theology. They needed to be bold, fearless, knowledgeable, and extrovert. Now I know a little bit of stuff, but 1 out of 4 didn't seem like a good score. And I seriously wondered if I had what it took. Please understand, I'm not fishing for compliments here. It was the impression I'd built up. And I discovered through a wise priest named Peter how toxic it was. He helped me discover that trying to be all those things wouldn't make me a better minister. And more importantly, he helped me realise that it wouldn't make me a good human being either. Boris, aka Rod, needed to look in the mirror properly. I don't believe we need to run ourselves in circles, being who and what we're not. The invitation of the Holy Spirit we call God is to be who and what we are as faithfully as we can, and discover each day that that's enough. And for this, I give grateful thanks. Blessings.